everybody. I'm Jason, and welcome to My Porch. I said in the first episode that I would talk about gender identity issues and a random rant every time. Well, I'm going to break that in episode 2. I have something a little bit more complex on my mind about gender identity, so we're just going to skip the rant. Otherwise, this will be like a half-hour episode. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. So, I call myself genderqueer now. It's a recent revelation to myself, and it's made me a much happier person. But what the hell does that actually mean? Well, it's pretty simple. Genderqueer means that I feel that I do not fit inside of the gender binary. What is the gender binary? That's the question. The gender binary is basically the idea that you're born into a sex, and that sex determines your personality. If you're a male, you have to have characteristic X, Y, and Z. If you're a female, you have to have characteristics A, B, and C. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, boys will be boys, little princesses will be little princesses, and all these things that we hype all the time about the differences between men and women. A lot of them are simply social. They're not inborn. You want the proof of this? Why do we use the phrase, "We will teach you how to be a real man"? If they were inborn, no one would have to be taught. It's as simple as that. We teach people to be a real man or a real woman, despite their own psychology. We expect them to behave in certain ways. We expect them to be certain things. Even if that's not who they are. Even if they're just not wired that way. We expect them to be that simply because they have a penis or they have a vagina. That's the gender binary. It is a social construct based on old, incorrect ideas of what gender is. So that begs the question, what is gender? Well, modern gender theory shows no. I skipped something very important. I'll go back to what gender is, but I have to say this. There is a lot of evidence, a lot of social science, psychology, sociology, anthropology, a lot of evidence that states that forcing people to follow the binary, to making young boys and young girls fit into these ideas that we have about what a man or a woman should be, actually does them harm. Psychological harm and even physical harm. I know it did me. When I left that part of me that was trying to cling to what I was supposed to be as a man, I felt a lot better. And there are studies that show that children, they don't even want to be doing a lot of the stuff that we expect them to do. But they do it anyway, and they internalize it, and it becomes part of them, and that's what the gender binary is. Programming people to be what society expects them to be instead of letting them find themselves, letting them be themselves. You're a guy, you gotta like sports, and cheap beer, and booby magazines. And you're a girl, you have to like pink, and you have to love princesses and unicorns. It's bullshit. Now, I'll go on to what gender really is. Believe it or not, sex does have something to do with gender. It is one of the 4 components that make up gender. Your genitals do produce hormones. Your brain is wired slightly differently between men and women. It's not that big of a difference. We make a big deal out of men, Mars, women, Venus, all that kind of crap. But honestly, the difference between the male and the female brain is basically how we get around to the same conclusions. We have the same thoughts, we have the same feelings, we have the same skills. There are just slight variations between how the sexes are wired to come to the same conclusions. And they're very, very slight. Read the literature. It's not that much of a difference. But it is part of what makes up gender. Sexual orientation is another part. Are you gay or straight? Are you into men or are you into women? Pretty straightforward. Do you see yourself? Do you self-identify as a man or a woman, psychologically, despite what your body is? How do you feel yourself to be? Do you feel yourself to be a man or do you feel yourself to be a woman? And then the final one is gender expression. Do you wish to present yourself in a way that is considered socially masculine or socially feminine? This is a healthier way of looking at things, but I still have a problem with it, because most people still look at all these things as an either or, man or woman. There's also intersex, which is when someone is born with the genitals or physical characteristics, would be a better way of putting it, of both a man and a woman. I know a lot of people like to use the word hermaphrodite. That's a pejorative, just so you know. Intersex is the proper term. Worms are hermaphrodites, humans are not. Don't call people worms. Don't be a jerk. Intersex. Thank you. Moving on. Man or woman, gay or straight. Well, what about bisexual people? What about asexual people? People who have no interest in sex at all. What about pansexual people? People who can find anybody, any gender, attractive, based more on emotional and an intellectual basis than a physical basis. What about a myriad of other ways that we relate to sex on an individual basis? Do you feel yourself to be a man or a woman or something different like I do? I'm not included in this identification binary. What about people who are like me? I present myself mainly as male, but I have little feminine touches. And other people saw that making a set of 4 binaries, which gives you 16 possibilities, is not enough to contain all human behavior. So they added continuums. The Kinsey scale. A 0 is exclusively heterosexual. A 6 is exclusively homosexual. And most people fall in the middle. This gives room for bisexual people, which do exist. Now, bisexual people exist, and I know people on both the gay side of things and the straight side of things who think that bisexual people are either like confused homosexuals who just haven't accepted it yet, or they're heterosexuals in a phase, or whatever. They're trying to get attention. Bullshit. Bisexuals exist. Deal with it. Moving on. This gives room to bisexual, but it doesn't give room for asexuals or pansexuals. It doesn't give room for people who are generally physically attracted to one gender or sex, but find themselves falling in love with someone of the other sex. You know, a lesbian who falls in love with a man. People like that are chastised just as much as for being a lesbian. Then she falls in love with a man. She doesn't mean to, but she does. And then she's chastised by the lesbian community. It doesn't account for a lot of things. A continuum between masculine and feminine, like man or woman identity, doesn't really account for me. Not really. I don't even feel like I'm on a continuum between man and woman. I feel like I'm something a little bit different than both. Psychologically, that is. What about, in my expression? It's not really on a continuum between the two. It's this with a touch of that. And that's got me thinking. What if instead of these continuums between 2 binaries, what if these things were independent factors? And that got me thinking of the mixing board. You've seen any movie you've seen about music production. You've got the studio engineer sitting there with the little sliders, mixing the bass and the drums and the vocals and the guitar and the piano and the backup singers. And this long board filled with sliders. What if all these things are their own individual slider? Man or woman, or intersex, well, that would have a switch. But what if it's not a continuum between gay or straight? What if it's androphilia, desire for men, or gynophilia, desire for women? What if they're both present in everybody, but you slide one up more, and that determines which sex you're more attracted to? And if they're both really close to each other, you're bisexual. If they're both really high, pansexual can happen. You can put a slider in for intellectually and emotionally attracted versus physically attracted. You can turn both androphilia and gynophilia down, and you got an asexual. Gender identity. Are you more of a man or more of a woman? More of a woman? Expression. Masculine expression, feminine expression. You can put up your masculine and your feminine, so it's a more masculine with a touch of feminine, or a more feminine with a touch of masculine. Put them in the middle and be androgynous. But you can take it further. What if you take all these personality traits that we consider to be masculine and feminine, or expression to be masculine and feminine, and take all those different traits and put them on their own slider, so that they're not actually attached to your gender, you're attached to yourself. And in this world where gender isn't considered to be a series of binaries, a continuum between these binaries, it isn't just the gender binary, man or woman. In this world where gynophilia, androphilia, independent, strong, nurturing, submissive, all these personality traits have their own slider. In this world, if everybody understood that, then everybody could be just who they are without fear of repercussion. You know, generally I'm attracted to women, but I fell in love with him. And a man can say that, or a woman can say that. And it doesn't matter. If we all understand that all these traits are more about being ourselves, instead of falling into some socially defined binary. Yes, that was an edit. Camera stopped. Sorry. Anyway, if everybody just understood that it doesn't matter about all the labels that we attach now. Man, woman, masculine, feminine, gay, straight. In a world where all these personality traits were part of the self instead of part of some collection of behaviors that were supposed to be because of one thing or another, I think we'd all be a lot happier. I know I am. Alright. So yeah, I think that's it. Room for debate. Room for questions. I already had to start the camera again once, and I wanted to have to do that again, so I'll leave it at that. Please send comments, send questions. I'd love to address them. I love to think about them. I love to make stuff up. So that's it for this episode. Have a good evening.